Well, good morning, guys.
Good morning.
And you'll let us know when that is. Steve's comment this morning about Sunday school reminded me of a story. So it's first day at summer Bible camp, and all the little kids are sitting in the room and in the cabin, and the Bible or the camp counselor's up there with his whistle and his shorts. Hi, kids. Good morning, good morning. Welcome to Bible camp. And okay, I got a puzzle for you. And he starts saying, he says, okay, what's small and brown, has a long furry tail, and likes nuts and climbs around in trees? One little kid raised his hand. It sounds like a squirrel, but I'll say Jesus. Boy, don't we condition our kids? You got to have that right answer. Well, let's turn to Genesis 28. We'll read 10 through 17 in just a moment, but. And Bill, thank you for filling in last week. Really appreciate that. You are such a flexible guy.
And everybody came back.
Yeah, that's a good sign. Genesis chapter 28, and again, just prepare to read verses 10 through 17, because we want to put verse 17, which is our text this morning, in context, and we're going to look at verse 17 over the next 2 weeks. There's 5 things we want to look at. Well, actually, that's not true. 17 through, I think it's 20, we'll look over the next 2 weeks. So, by way of review, we've been looking at the dream. And the high points of the dream are simply this, that Jacob goes to sleep and he has this dream of a ladder. And the ladder is doing something. The role of the ladder in the dream is different than what he perceived. So I had the idea. Okay, well, let me back up. And out of that comes this new truth that God reveals to him in this dream. We call it the promise that God's doing something to Jacob in order to do something through Jacob. And that is to bless, to be a blessing to all of the world, fulfilled via Jesus Christ and what he has done for us. So the points of the dream were the ladder. Well, in Jacob's mind, what I'm proposing to you is that in Jacob's mind, a ladder is to climb. That really depicts Jacob's life and experience. Everything we have read about Jacob is climbing that ladder towards success. To be somebody, to have a name, to have the blessing, to have the birthright. Everything about him is self-serving, climbing a ladder. That's what ladders are for, to climb for success. God, in an amazing way, and this I'm suggesting this, I've never heard this before, but it's how I'm interpreting it, is that oftentimes in dreams puts a common element in a wholly new light, a bizarre light. No, ladders are to connect. Remember, the angels were ascending and descending. Ladders are not single directional up. Ladders are bidirectional, two-way. That's what I'm suggesting, is the bizarre element of the dream. So those two, the common or the known, I've got the known, the bizarre, and then the new truth is that, okay, once God has his attention in the dream to reveal this amazing promise to him once again, that Jacob, I've got plans for you, and I'm going to do something to you in order to do something through you. So that's where we left it last time. Let's read Genesis 28, 10 through 17.
Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He reached a certain place where he needed a camp because the sun had gone down. He took one of the stones and placed it near his head. And he fell asleep in that place and had a dream. He saw a stairway erected on the earth with its top reaching to the heavens. The angels of God were going up and coming down it. And the Lord stood at the top. He said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham, and the God of your father Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the ground you are lying on. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west, east, north, and south.
All people on the earth will be blessed through you and through your offspring. I'm with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
Wow.
Jacob awoke from his sleep. He thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
Good, good. Thank you, guys. And so that text this morning is, he was afraid after this experience. He awakened and he was afraid, and he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. That's what we're looking at today. Okay, so where we'd like to go with this is verse 17. It opens up. It makes a declarative statement about Jacob. It's a label put on Jacob. Now, in the story, readers, Jacob, because of this that's just occurred, he is afraid. Yara is the word. Yara in Hebrew, Yara. And the only reason I'm saying that because it's going to have reference later. He is afraid. He's in a state of fear. Point one. And that's what I've got here, number one. Then, beginning in verse 17, there are 5 things that we want to look at over the next 2 weeks while Jacob is in this state of fear. And there's some great things we can learn from this. He's in fear. The writer is saying he's in fear. And so let's see what Jacob does with that when he's in fear. Okay. And I've got 2.1. He makes a declaration. And that declaration, there's going to be 5 pieces to that declaration. We're going to look at 1 and 2 today. First of all, I mean, it's like stating the obvious, but not so fast. He states that he is in fear. He states his state. Okay, why? You say, well, so? Well, one thing I have learned as a man is it is not acceptable to be in a state of fear. Fear represents what? Weakness. To be afraid is to be weak. And men do not like to be weak. Is that not true? Would you agree?
Yeah, you're touching a good one.
Yeah, touching a good one there. It is not cool. It is not acceptable. And I use the word acceptable, not cool. Acceptable. It is not acceptable. We revolt from being fearful. But Jacob, in his state of fear, as the writer has just said, acknowledges his state of fear. What can we learn from that? Any thoughts? Just broad strokes. He is in fear, stated fact. He acknowledges that he's in fear. What are your thoughts?
Quick question first.
Yeah.
Is this the same word for fear when you see that common phrase, fear of the Lord?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, 'cause I know Peterson says fear and Lord put together creates a different context than the two separate.
It very well could be given the definition of Yara. Yara is reverential fear. You got my attention.
Which
This, yeah.
and you're trembling, but he doesn't want it. I mean, fear to me is time to you fight or you flee. He should be fleeing, but he's not. He's facing this thing, so the sense of fear is a little different.
There you're
than
hitting
not
on it.
taking
Yes. We men tend to numb the fear, cover the fear, flee from the fear, ignore the fear, anything but acknowledge the fear. This is where I want to go with this. The first thing he does is he acknowledges his fear. That is a fearful thing to do. Is that not true? Yes. He acknowledges the fear. Now think about it. It is not cool to be fearful. I remember when I was in junior high school, I was just thinking about this over the weekend. I was with my brother and my son, and we were actually on a road trip together in South Dakota, and we were talking about wrestling. My youngest brother is a wrestling coach, and Chris, and Mike wrestled, and I wrestled. And I was thinking about this, I said to those guys, I said, I really loved the sport of wrestling in junior high school. I felt like I was in the best shape. The workout, I enjoyed the workouts. At that time is the only time in my life that I could climb a rope without any feet.
Wow.
I could just go up. Well, you could have done it too if you would have been in. You know, yeah, they used to, maybe they still have the rope, but I could actually climb to the gym ceiling without my feet, without holding myself with my feet. And that's really what one of the goals was, is to build your upper strength. Now, this is junior high. And I loved the workouts. I loved the idea of wrestling and all that. I could not handle the matches emotionally and psychologically. I would get so nervous. And the reason I was nervous, I was fearful of losing. That's the only thing I could come up with. To look foolish, to lose, because losing is unacceptable. And not only that, but expressing fear was unacceptable. I wish I would have had the wherewithal to be able to talk to a coach or somebody older about this, and all I would have had to say, Mike, everybody feels like this. You have to just work through it. It would have been so helpful to have that. But no, real men they're not afraid. And of course, as a 12, 13-year-old young man, you gotta stuff the fear. Unfortunately, there are 40 and 50 and 60-year-old men who are still living in the junior high mentality of stuffing your fear and don't show weakness. This is why we're hitting on this. Jacob acknowledged his fear. Now, I did not come up with this. My good friend Bert Wright at our church, in a different context, used this diagram that I think is so helpful and has so many applications, one of which is here. So I would like to explain this. And it's the whole idea of stating or acknowledging your current state. And the idea being that we as men resist that because stating where we really are is scary and it's unacceptable. Two graphs, X and Y. The bottom, X, awareness level, our awareness, our ability to perceive. The Y-axis is competency, our ability to do. We begin, whatever the context, let's say in the relation to fear, because that's what we're talking about. The junior high mentality begins right here. Number one is low competency, and actually low awareness, low awareness, and low competency, the lowest box. So that's when you are not very good at wrestling or whatever you're involved with, and you're not aware of it. And this is oftentimes teen brain. Is that not true? Yeah, teen brain. Is that there might be perceived a very high level of competency. Dad, I've been there.
Oh, yes.
Oh boy. Dad, I know where you are, Dad. Do you? Okay. All right. Low awareness, low competency. But then we hopefully can move beyond that to box number 2, where we at least know we at least know that we don't know to some degree. We know we're not very good. Okay? All right? Right there. So our awareness is now, say, gee, I'm now open to learn. That comes a little bit later. And then finally, we move to box 3, where we're cooking in life, and there's a high degree of awareness and a high degree of competency. Where we're aware, we're good. This comes in life, in the natural process of life. This comes much later, probably, way into our 30s, where we become competent in our skill set, and we're aware to some, we're aware. And you would think that this would be the top of the pyramid. But what Bert suggested is there's actually another box, and it's where you move to box 4. So you move around counterclockwise, where you actually have a low awareness, but a very high degree of competency. And Bill, you were stating this morning when Bill came in and was talking about how the city has come back to Bill now and wants him to do a special project, and in his area of expertise, and that is so fluid to him, and so exciting. He can just move through that. His challenge is putting a price on it. He's never had to do that before, in a contract basis. But this could be an example of riding a bike. There could be a time where you crash, and you burn, and you're struggling, and then where you get pretty good, and you're pretty good, but then in time it just becomes fluid, and you don't even think about it. Well, in relation to fear, we move through the same kind of process. Early on in life, early on in awareness experience, we don't want to acknowledge it because it's unacceptable. But what I'm suggesting is this model, which I think has a lot of application, is a model that we could transpose over on Jacob, that he is not only afraid, but he is aware that he's afraid. And that level of awareness is everything. That I'd like to suggest that unless you and I can get beyond that, or have gone beyond that, it's like we're bound up in life and we can't move to the next level, because if fear is holding us back, we can't move to bigger and better things.
Are you equating high A with fear?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I'm equating awareness with fear. Yeah.
Right. So as you go back to low A, you're not afraid. Is that because you're oblivious or because you don't care?
Well, I would say low awareness means you're afraid, but you're just not even aware you're afraid. It's some other problem. It's some other. We'll do anything. We'll do anything except take the ownership that I'm afraid. And what I'm suggesting, there's such a resistance in us to say, I'm afraid.
You created a progressive process here.
Yeah.
And 4 being the highest level of maturity, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah. Awareness and competency is to, I would say in correlating that to Jacob's, or with the fear model of what we're talking about, the fear example, is that a man who has struggled with the subject or with the issue of pornography. Pornography is a shameful thing that we all we all understand that it is. We perceive it as shame, and it's something you really don't want to be involved with. It's true. there's a coming out process that we can go through. If we don't, we become bound by this particular sin. And the highest level of which is to be able to say, yes, I have struggled with I have struggled with pornography. And I felt like I was living a double life. And I felt so shameful and dirty. And I was able to work through this in this direction. And to be able to talk openly about that, identifying yourself with that, and to be able to talk about that is the highest level. In this particular case. Yeah.
Alcohol, all these different things.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. But what happens in any sin, in any situation, it tends to keep us suppressed down into the lower levels. You know, we're not probably down in number 2. You know, I've got a very high awareness of my shame, but I have a very low ability, a competency in how to deal with it in any kind of practical or successful way, and I keep getting into the same thing over and over. Do you see how broad this model can be? So, all right. So anyway, oh jeez, that was the introduction. But anyway, the point is, number 1, is that, and this is point 1 of 5, is that he acknowledged his fear. And until you and I can acknowledge our fear and talk about it openly with another person, we are handcuffed. We are handcuffed in life to move to higher levels of competency and awareness. So, yeah. So that's the point. That's the point. And the second, and I'll just touch on this, I'll just introduce this briefly. I gotta get to my notes. He acknowledged it. Well, here, I can just go back. Number 2.2, the second thing he does is he interprets the event. And I get that from, notice that he says, he was afraid. Oh, I forgot. 2.1, rewind. He says, how awesome is this place? This is my point. I went everywhere but the point. How awesome is this place? It's the same word, Yahweh. He says, Jacob is afraid. And then he says, how frightening is this place? That's where he acknowledges it. That's where I get that. Sorry, guys. We'll plop that in there. We'll edit that back in there. 2.1, he says, how awesome or how frightening is this place? And then 2.2, he goes on to say he interprets this place. Now, I just want to introduce one thought, and we'll hit on this next week. When you and I are able to interpret a scene, a circumstance, an event in one's life or in your surroundings, what does that say? What does that say about you? If you're able to describe something and see it and explain it,
it reveals who you are. I mean, if you interpret something, you might interpret it incorrectly, but you're gonna bend it to what you want it to be.
well,
Maybe.
that is an interpretation. But in this case, he takes the reality. Remember, the writer says Jacob is afraid.
Right.
He says, how fearful is this place? He acknowledges it. So he's in alignment with where he really is. That's my point. He's in alignment. And if you and I, number 2, he then states, based on this level of alignment, he is afraid, the author says, and now he says, I am afraid, and he's in alignment with reality. And within that context of alignment, he says, this is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. We'll pick up there next week.